Don't you dare bow to him, Clara. He's not worth the trouble. The shout cracked through the chandelier-lit lobby, sharp enough to make the marble seem to vibrate. A dozen heads snapped toward the scene. A frazzled waitress bent in a deep, respectful bow, an elderly man staring back at her as if she'd spoken a ghost's name, and a manager storming across the floor like he owned every inch of polished stone beneath him. The air held its breath. Someone's suitcase wheels squeaked to a stop. A bellhop froze mid-stride, gripping a designer bag like it might shatter. But the old man in the denim jacket didn't move. His lips trembled, whether from shock or something older, heavier, no one could tell. His scuffed suitcase rested by his feet, looking painfully out of place among the parade of high-end luggage scattered around the lobby. And Clara held her bow, hands pressed together, posture perfect, her voice a soft string of Japanese syllables the manager clearly didn't understand. Yet the man in front of her did. His reaction was immediate, an almost imperceptible recoil, as if her words had reached a part of him the entire world had ignored. The lobby wasn't silent. It was waiting. Only minutes earlier, the lobby had been loud, too loud, chatter bouncing off marble columns, heels clicking, guests laughing, as if luxury gave them permission to be louder than everyone else. Under the blazing chandeliers, the place looked less like a hotel and more like a theater production about wealth. And he, the quiet Japanese man in the worn denim jacket, wasn't part of the cast. Masato Ishikawa had stood in line for nearly 20 minutes, though the line had moved and reshaped around him like water flowing around a stone. A couple with shopping bags. A man in a charcoal suit barking about venture capital. A woman carrying a dog dressed better than most people he passed on the street. All of them waved ahead of him by staff, who barely met his eyes. Not one person noticed the small tremor in his hands. Not one person heard the shallow breaths he tried to steady. Not one person questioned why a man his age looked like he was swallowing humiliation in slow, painful gulps. The clerk finally glanced at him with a smile stretched too thin to be real. Name. He began to answer, but didn't even get halfway through before she was already shaking her head, already dismissing him, already turning her attention to the next person with the assumption that he was the one who didn't belong. Then came the manager, loud, performative, the kind of man who spoke as if every word was an announcement. Sir, this hotel caters to a certain clientele. If cost is an issue, I'd be happy to recommend places more appropriate. The humiliation landed hard. So hard, in fact, that Masato's grip on his suitcase loosened, just enough for its worn leather handle to creak under the shift of weight. He bowed his head, not in respect, in the quiet collapse of a man who'd been carrying far too much for far too long. And then Clara stepped forward. The same Clara now bowing the image you uploaded, shoulders rounded in perfect form, expression soft but resolute, offering the kind of courtesy that could silence an entire room. Her Japanese was flawless, her courage even more so, and that was when everything shifted. Before the lobby froze in that breathless standoff, before Clara's greeting shattered the humiliation tightening around him, Masato Ishikawa had already been unraveling. 3 weeks earlier, the betrayal had begun, but the past slammed into the present as Clara lifted her head from her bow, her eyes steady, her voice gentle.
Ishikawa-sama.
She said again in flawless, almost ceremonial Japanese, honorific and all. Masato's breath hitched. For a moment, he forgot the marble beneath his feet, the onlookers, even his own name. He had not heard anyone address him that way, properly, respectfully, since the day he left Tokyo.
あなた WA、日本語 GA。
He murmured, his voice cracking on the second word. You speak Japanese? Clara nodded, hands still folded before her.
はい、少しです。
Yes, a little. It wasn't just the language. It was the sincerity behind it. And it landed harder than the manager's cruelty ever could. The manager snorted. What the hell is happening? Clara, get up. You're embarrassing the hotel. But Clara didn't move. She turned, stepped behind the counter, and began typing into a computer with sharp, urgent keystrokes. Her brow furrowed. Sir, she called out, the reservation is here. under M. Sato. They never scrolled down to verify it. A ripple of gasps. Someone dropped a drink. The lobby stiffened. Every pair of eyes swiveling toward the guilty staff. The manager paled. The clerk's mouth worked soundlessly. Masato straightened for the first time since entering the hotel. His humiliation didn't vanish, but dignity began stitching itself slowly back together. He looked directly at the manager and spoke softly, his Japanese accent flattening into something unmistakably powerful. "My full name," he said, "is Masato Ishikawa, founder of the Ishikawa Group, including this hotel." Silence cracked across the room like lightning. The manager staggered backward. "Yes, sir, I didn't." Masato raised a hand. No anger, just certainty. "You're fired, both of you." Two security guards stepped forward at once, guiding the trembling staff away. The lobby remained frozen, breathless, suspended between shame and awe. Then Masato turned to Clara. "You saw me," he said quietly, "when no one else did." He offered her a card, a personal one, stamped in silver. "Cultural liaison. Full tuition, if you'll accept it." Clara's hand shook. "Sir, why me?" Masato bowed. A deep, intentional bow, one that made half the lobby gasp. Because respect should be rewarded. And in that fragile moment, he felt a truth worth speaking aloud. Moments like this make you wonder, how many people do we pass by every day without seeing them at all? How often do we judge before listening? If stories like this remind you to look a little closer at the people around you, then stay with us. Don't drift away like the crowd in that lobby. Some stories deserve witnesses. The elevator rose so quietly that Masato barely noticed the floor slipping past. His pulse, still uneven from the scene downstairs, thrummed louder than the polished machinery. When the doors opened, the hallway exhaled a hush meant for people who slept on silk and never worried about being believed. The Imperial Suite waited at the end. When he stepped inside, the lights warmed automatically, revealing a space larger than the apartment he'd grown up in. Gold accents, a panoramic view of Los Angeles glittering like spilled jewels, a bed so pristine it seemed untouched by human weight. Everything was immaculate and utterly, painfully silent. Luxury had never felt so much like loneliness. Masato walked slowly through the suite, fingers brushing the marble counter, the leather armrests, the heavy drapes. He had built places like this to make guests feel important. Now it only reminded him how small he'd become in the eyes of the one person he'd trusted to carry his legacy forward. His grandson's voice echoed in his memory. Calm, calculated, the voice of someone who had already moved on. "It's not personal, grandfather. The board believes we need new leadership. The documents are already in motion. Paper cuts could wound deeper than blades." A soft knock broke the stillness. Clara stepped inside, a tray in hand. Porcelain cups, a small pot of green tea, steam curling upward like a quiet blessing. "I wasn't sure how you liked it," she said, bowing slightly. "So, I brew it the way my host family taught me. I hope it's right." Masato blinked, the tension inside him loosening by a fraction. "That is more care than I received from anyone today." She laughed softly, a humble sound. I know what it feels like when people assume things." They sat at the small dining table. She poured the tea with slow, deliberate movements, respect woven into each gesture. "You speak beautifully," Masato said. "You're Japanese. It carries sincerity." "My mother made me practice every night," she said. She said learning a culture meant learning its heart, not just its words. He nodded. Very true. For a moment, he allowed himself to study her, not in the way of a man assessing an employee, but as someone recognizing a rare, genuine soul. She had no agenda, no calculation, just humanity. "Clara," he asked gently, "were your dreams?" She hesitated, the kind of hesitation that came from wanting to speak truth, but fearing it might sound naive. "I want to study anthropology," she finally whispered, "but my mom's medical bills. I can barely afford rent, let alone tuition." Masato felt something shift, like the first crack of sunlight after a storm. For the first time since landing in Los Angeles, he didn't feel alone. Masato moved through the hotel the next morning the way a ghost might. Quietly, unnoticed, slipping into hallways and service corridors no executive had bothered to enter in years. He wore the same simple jacket, carried no entourage, and asked no one's permission. If the Los Angeles branch of Miyako Hotels had rotted from the inside, he intended to smell it for himself. And it didn't take long. Behind the glossy lobby and polished elevators, the truth hid in plain sight. A storage room stacked with expired amenities. Kitchen staff rushing with dark circles under their eyes, whispering about shortened shifts and impossible quotas. A bellhop lifting luggage alone. Not because others were busy, but because half the team had been cut to reduce labor costs. Masato's jaw tightened. He knew this pattern. He had seen it before, at other failing chains, at competitors who mistook profit for purpose. He stepped into the back-of-house corridor, leading to the laundry department. The heat, the smell, the frantic pace, it all tugged him back decades. Los Angeles, 1974. He was 19, washing dishes in a Pico Boulevard ramen shop. Scalding water, burned fingers, long nights listening to English he barely understood. He had learned hospitality from the ground up, one bowl, one mop, one apology at a time. Back then, customer care wasn't strategy. It was survival. Now he watched an exhausted housekeeper fold sheets faster than humanly possible, her hands trembling. "This isn't how my hotels run," Masato muttered under his breath. A soft voice answered behind him. "I know." Clara stood there, having followed discreetly, her expression troubled. She had changed into her uniform and tied her hair neatly, as if preparing for battle. "You've seen this before?" he asked. She nodded. Every department is understaffed. Management blames corporate. Corporate blames management. Meanwhile, the guests pay for service we can't deliver. Masato absorbed that, something cold settling in his stomach. They walked together through the garden level, where the once beautiful koi pond now sat half-cleaned, algae creeping along its edges, a symbol of neglect, of disrespect. He crouched beside it, running a hand along the chipped stone. "This hotel was my pride," he whispered. "I trusted people to maintain it." Clara hesitated before asking, "Do you think someone let it fall apart on purpose?" He looked up sharply, because the thought had already occurred to him. "Perhaps," he said. "Or perhaps negligence grows when no one fears being seen." But as he stood, dusting off his hands, a darker suspicion tugged at him, a whisper he didn't want to believe. What if the decay wasn't accidental? What if someone inside the company wanted his empire weakened? He didn't have proof. Not yet. But Masato Ishikawa knew the smell of sabotage, and this hotel reeked of it. Clara hesitated at the doorway of the Imperial Suite, fingers tightening around the trays she carried. Masato could see it, the kind of pause that wasn't about knocking or politeness. It was a way of a story pressing against her ribs, begging to be spoken. "Come," he said gently. She stepped inside, set the tea down, and for a moment stared at the steam rising from the cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "My mom served in the Air Force," she began. "We lived in Japan for 6 years. Yokota Air Base. I was 9 when we moved there, 15 when we left." She smiled faintly. "I thought I'd forget the language once we came back. But I couldn't. It felt like losing a piece of myself." Masato nodded, sensing there was more. "College was supposed to be next," she said. "I got into a program for international relations. But then my mom got sick, bills piled up, and her breath hitched. Dreams don't pay rent. So I started working. Cafe shifts, night shifts, anything. The hotel job was supposed to be temporary." She shook her head, almost laughing at herself. "And now you offer me a position people would kill for. Tuition covered. A chance to go back to the dream I had to bury." She swallowed, her eyes glistening. "But I'm scared it'll look like I'm using you. Like I bowed to you because you were someone important. I don't ever want you to think I'm taking advantage." Masato leaned forward, his expression warm but firm. "Clara," he said, "respect is not opportunism. You treated me with dignity before you knew who I was. That is why you earned this, not out of ambition, but humanity." Her shoulders loosened, tension unraveling thread by thread. You saw me when others did not, he added. And now I see you. Truly. Clara exhaled, the sound halfway between relief and disbelief. She wiped a tear with the heel of her hand and whispered, "Thank you. I don't think anyone's believed in me like this in a long time." Masato felt something shift, subtle but unmistakable. A quiet bond. Trust, yes, but also admiration. Not the romantic kind. Not yet, but the rare connection between two people who had lived unseen in very different ways. She looked out toward the balcony, where city lights glimmer like distant possibilities. "I want to do this," she said. "I want to make something of myself." Masato nodded. Then we moved forward together. A moment of silence settled, soft, powerful, shared. If you've ever carried a dream too heavy for your circumstances, if you've ever felt the world wouldn't give you a chance no matter how hard you worked, then stay close to this story. Let it remind you that unseen people matter, and that your presence here doesn't go unnoticed. The knock on the suite door was too sharp to belong to staff, too loud to be polite. Masato didn't even have a turn. He felt the shift in the air before it happened, the faint electric buzz of trouble wearing expensive shoes. Clara opened the door and froze. A young man stepped inside, without waiting. Tailored suit, slick back hair. Ego arriving half a second before he did. Two corporate lawyers flanked him like decorative armor. "Grandfather," he said, voice smooth as polished ice. "Imagine my surprise when I learned you checked into one of our hotels under a fake name." Masato's face remained still, but Clara saw something flicker, something brittle and bruised. "Kaido," Masato said softly. "Why are you here?" Kaido spread his arms like he was blessing the room. "To help you, of course. You disappear for weeks, no security, no board updates, and then you're caught. What? Playing tourist?" His smile sharpened. "People are worried you're becoming unpredictable." Masato's jaw dipped a fraction, barely noticeable unless you were watching for pain. Clara was. "I needed time to think," Masato replied. "Away from noise. Away from manipulation." Kaido's eyebrows lifted. "Manipulation? Grandfather, please. The company needs modern leadership. Fresh vision. You hiding under a budget alias? It just proves my point." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're out of touch. The world is moving on. So should you." Clara's hands clenched at her sides. Masato didn't flinch. "Is that why you tried using legal loopholes to remove me?" Kaido shrugged, unbothered. "Business is business. You taught me that." "No," Masato said, voice tightening. "I taught you loyalty, responsibility, integrity." Kaido laughed, actually laughed. "You still believe those matter?" "Grandfather, look around." He gestured broadly, as though the suite itself proved him right. "Optics, efficiency, profit. That's what wins now. Not your sentimental obsession with the past." The words landed like knives. Clara stepped subtly closer to Masato, not in defense, but in solidarity. He noticed, and it gave him enough strength to straighten. "Kaido," he said, "you came to push me aside." "I came," Kaido corrected, "to finalize your retirement." Silence thickened, heavy as storm air. Masato breathed once, deeply, then again. When he spoke, the quiet in his voice hit harder than any shout. "I will not be erased. Not by you. Not by anyone." He rose slowly, dignity settling over him like armor. "Tomorrow morning, I will address the entire company. Publicly." Kaido's confidence faltered. "Publicly? About what?" Masato stepped forward, gaze steady, unshakable. "About taking back what is mine." Clara felt the room shift, like the moment before a tremor, when the earth holds its breath. The war for the company had just begun. By noon, every employee, from bellhops to senior managers, had been summoned to the grand event hall. Whispered rumors swirled through the crowd like drafts of cold air. "The chairman is here. Someone got fired. Something big is happening." Clara stood near the back, heart pounding. She'd never seen a full staff assembly called without warning. No one had, not in her entire time at the hotel. When Masato stepped onto the stage, the room went silent, instantly, instinctively. He wore no corporate armor, no entourage, no polished PR veneer. Just a simple suit and an expression carved from tired stone. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady but carrying an invisible weight. "I am Masato Ishikawa, founder and chairman of Miyako International Hotels." Gasps rippled through the hall. A few employees turned pale as the truth settled in. Masato let the silence breathe before continuing. "I came here under a different name. Not as your employer, not as a billionaire, as a guest." He softened his gaze, scanning the faces before him. And what I experienced broke my heart. A manager shifted nervously. The desk clerk who had dismissed him stared at the floor. I was ignored, mocked, waved aside. Masato's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I was told I could not afford my own hotel. I was spoken to as if I were a burden. Shame thickened the air. "But one person," he said, turning slightly, "treated me as if I mattered, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because hospitality is about humanity." Dozens of heads turned toward Clara. She froze, heat creeping up her neck. Masato continued. Clara greeted me with respect. She listened. She looked deeper than appearances. "She is the embodiment of what this company was built upon." Clara wished the ground would swallow her whole. But at the same time, something warm bloomed in her chest. Pride. She wasn't used to that feeling. Masato faced the staff again, posture straightening with resolve. "Somewhere along the way, we lost our values. Corners have been cut, training neglected. Leadership allowed arrogance to replace empathy." He paused, letting the words settle like dust. "This stops today." Murmurs surged. Effective immediately, all leadership positions implemented under recent administrative changes are suspended pending review. New training protocols will begin this week. Quality, service, and dignity will return as our core. A staff member whispered, "He's undoing everything Kaido did." Masato concluded, voice soft but immovable. "This company will rise again, not through profit margins, but through people. And it begins now." The room erupted, not chaotically, but with a collective exhale. Relief, hope, fear, all tangled together. And Clara stood a little taller. The days after the staff meeting felt different, like the hotel itself had taken a long breath after years of suffocating under polish and pretense. The marble floors seemed less sterile, the halls less tense. It wasn't magic. It was work. Hard, slow work. And Masato threw himself into it. He moved to the hotel with a notebook in hand, stopping to observe things most executives never noticed. The frayed edge of a bellhop's uniform, the tired slump of a housekeeper's shoulders, the way the front desk flinched whenever a guest raised their voice. Clara walked beside him, not as a shadow, not as an assistant, but as a partner. "Tell me exactly what you see," Masato would say. She would, honestly, fearlessly, and each time he nodded, impressed by her clarity. Together, they sat with staff one by one, line cooks, janitors, receptionists, concierges. Clara listened with an empathy that coaxed out truths people had swallowed for years. Masato listened with the quiet focus of a craftsman inspecting the foundation of a home he built with his own hands. A bellhop admitted he hadn't been trained properly in 2 years. A housekeeper confessed she'd been assigned double the normal workload. A server whispered about leadership playing favorites, cutting corners, ignoring complaints. Each confession added to a ledger Masato kept not in his notebook, but in his heart. Between meetings, he worked on something heavier. Paperwork to block Kaido's legal maneuvering. Contracts. Bylaws. Emergency clauses he never thought he'd have to use. His signature moved steadily across the documents, not with anger, but with clarity. "This is not revenge," Masato said quietly one afternoon as he initialed another page. "This is protection. For the company. For the people who believed in what we built." Clara watched him, admiration warming her expression. "You care more than anyone in this building realizes." Masato smiled softly. "I care because I remember." He gestured to the bustling lobby below. "I was once the boy washing dishes at minimum wage, grateful for every shift. I survived because someone gave me a chance. He looked at her then, not as a chairman, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had lost too much and found one unexpected ally. You remind me of him, he said. Of who? She whispered. Of the person I used to be, before wealth complicated everything. Clara didn't know what to say, so she simply held his gaze, steady and grateful. In their shared silence, something wordless formed, a connection built not from power or obligation, but from mutual respect, not romance. Something older, something stronger. And as the sun dipped behind the Los Angeles skyline, their hotel, felt like it had taken its first true step toward healing. The press conference was held in the same ballroom where the hotel once celebrated its grandest galas. Rows of cameras lined the back wall. Reporters murmured in anticipation. Executives shifted uneasily in their seats. When Masato stepped up to the podium, he didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. His presence alone quieted the room. I came here as a guest, he began, voice steady. Not as a chairman, not as a billionaire, but as a man who wanted to see whether the heart of this hotel still beat the way it once did. Silence deepened, not accusing, not defensive, simply true. I was judged by my clothes, my age, my simplicity. And while that experience hurt, it revealed something more painful. The way our values had drifted. His gaze swept across the faces before him. Hospitality is not a performance. It is a promise. The grandson, Kaido, sat rigid in the front row, jaw tight. Lawyers flanked him, but even they seemed unsure now. Masato continued, This company will return to its roots, dignity, sincerity, and service beyond status. And let me be clear, those who led us astray will step aside. A ripple of whispers passed through the audience. Kaido stood. For a moment, anger flashed across his face. Then something shifted, shame, realization, maybe even the faintest spark of humility. Without a word, he bowed stiffly and walked out of the ballroom. Not defeated, but undeniably changed. A door closing. And perhaps someday, another waiting to open. After the conference, Clara found Masato in a quiet hallway. The weight of the moment settling around him. You spoke for all of us, she said softly. Masato studied her with a warmth that felt like legacy made visible. Clara, you are the future of our company's culture. You carry both the discipline of tradition and the compassion of a new generation. You are the bridge we need. Her breath caught, not from ambition, but from the gravity of trust. Later, Masato returned to the lobby where everything had begun. Staff gathered without being asked. The air held a reverent stillness. As he stepped onto the marble, every employee, from senior managers to night shift housekeepers, bowed deeply, respectfully, sincerely. Masato bowed back, slowly, fully. Beside him, Clara bowed too, equal in humility, equal in honor. And together, they rose. If this story touched something quiet inside you, if it made you rethink how you treat strangers or how easily dignity can be given or taken, then don't just walk away. Stay with us. Let stories like this remind us who we should be.